The man's jaw is clenched shut, not by will but by dread. 4 soldiers hold him down. Another forces his mouth open with an iron rod. He thrashes, gagging, eyes wild. Torchlight flickers. In the center of the tent, a pot simmers, not water. Gold, molten, bubbling, alive. The scent is metallic, unnatural. The Parthian general doesn't shout. He whispers. He wanted to eat the world. Let him choke on it. The gold moves slowly, but once poured, it finds every crevice. His tongue, throat, lungs. There is no scream, just gurgling, a hiss, then silence. What did he do to deserve this? Some say it was greed, others say ambition. But the truth? He thought he could own Rome, and the East reminded him, not all debts are paid in coin. The man who choked on his empire. Rome remembers its conquerors. Caesar crossing the Rubicon, Augustus cloaked in divine destiny. But what about the man who bought his glory? Marcus Crassus wasn't born noble. He carved his name into the marble of power with fire, blood, and coin. While others fought for honor, he profited from ruin. When Rome burned, he sold the water. When slaves rebelled, he crushed them, not for Rome's safety but for his legacy. He made deals in shadows, built empires from ashes, and yet it wasn't enough. He wanted to stand shoulder to shoulder with legends, to be immortal, not just in marble but in memory. But history is cruel. It records victories and devours mistakes. And Crassus, he learned that the most dangerous currency is pride, because Rome did remember him, not with statues but with molten gold. The smell of smoke always meant profit to Crassus. In the slums of Rome, flames danced from roof to roof, while panicked citizens screamed for help. And there, in the shadow of their ruin, Crassus's private fire brigade stood motionless until the deed was signed. "Sell me the house," he would say calmly, as ashes curled into the sky. And when they did, he saved what remained. To some it was ruthless innovation, to others parasitic cruelty, but to Marcus Crassus, it was just business, and business was booming. He wasn't born into power. His family had prestige, but not permanence. That changed during the civil wars, when Crassus backed Sulla and walked away with confiscated land and a fortune in slaves, hundreds of trained builders, thousands of desperate laborers, a machine built to devour Rome from within. Crassus wasn't just rich, he became indispensable. Real estate, silver mines, contracts, debt manipulation. There wasn't a corner of Roman life untouched by his reach. But influence wasn't enough. Romans didn't worship wealth, they worshipped glory, and glory required blood. So he bought his way into the first triumvirate, an uneasy alliance with 2 titans, Pompey the Great, Rome's war hero, and Julius Caesar, the rising storm. Pompey brought military prestige, Caesar brought ambition and popular support. Crassus, he brought coin, endless, glittering coin to fund their dreams. But while the crowds threw laurel wreaths at Caesar and cheered Pompey's parades, Crassus remained in the shadows. He paid for Rome's victories, but watched from the sidelines as others received the ovation. It aided him. He'd whisper to allies in the Senate. They cheered generals, not bankers. And in the privacy of his estate, he watched Caesar return from Gaul with wagons of gold and thousands of chained captives, and he knew money wasn't enough. Rome loved blood more than coin. That's when his eyes turned east, to Parthia, a kingdom that had resisted Roman might, a name that stirred fear and legend. No Roman army had ever dared to conquer it, not even Caesar. It was perfect. Here was his chance to not just fund history but to write it. He would lead the campaign, he would claim the victory, and at last Rome would carve his face into marble and call him invincible. But as he studied maps and summoned legions, whispers stirred in the wind. Old priests warned of bad omens, senators grumbled behind closed doors. Even Pompey, his ally, raised a brow, but Crassus only smiled. "What's legacy?" he muttered, "if not bought with a little risk?" And in the desert beyond the empire, something ancient waited, not just to kill him, but to shatter him. Crassus rode east like a man already immortal. Behind him marched 7 legions, 40,000 strong veterans, mercenaries, conscripts, and cavalry. The banners shimmered under the sun, stamped with Rome's proud eagle. He passed through Syria like a conquering hero, brushing off the governor's warnings. "Parthia isn't Gaul," they told him. "They'll run," he replied. "Gold doesn't fear dust." But the sands didn't run, they watched. And the deeper he pressed into Mesopotamia, the less familiar it all became. The flat, endless desert, the silence between oases, the vanishing scouts. Reports came and went, allies offered advice, but Crassus refused their guides. He didn't want help, he wanted credit. He ignored Artavasdes, the Armenian king, who begged Crassus to take a safer mountain route. Crassus laughed. "Do you think I fear shadows?" But in those shadows waited Sirena, a Parthian noble, tall, young, and far more cunning than Crassus imagined. He commanded fewer men, but his cavalry was a storm of hooves and arrows. His archers carried composite bows that could pierce armor, and his horsemen didn't charge. They danced, they lured, circled, disappeared, ghosts in silk and steel. Still, Crassus pressed forward. He wanted speed, spectacle, a decisive strike that would burn his name into Roman legend. He ordered forced marches, ignored exhaustion. His men whispered that their general chased a dream, not a plan. The deeper they went, the quieter they became. The sun blistered the ground beneath their sandals. Water ran low. Morale dipped. One soldier carved a grim joke into his shield. Victory or vapor. Then the horizon shifted. A black dust cloud. The Parthians had arrived. But there were no siege engines, no infantry, just cavalry, fast, fluid, and strangely unafraid. Crassus formed a square and prepared for a frontal clash. But the enemy didn't charge. They surrounded. They waited, and then they began to fire. Not in volleys, but waves. Arrows blackened the sky. Roman shields rattled like drums. The wounded screamed. Horses collapsed. The sun rose, high and merciless, and still the Parthians fired. Crassus ordered a countercharge. Publius, his own son, led the Roman cavalry into the enemy ranks, only to vanish beyond the dunes. Time passed. No word came. Then something shimmered on the horizon. A rider approached. He wasn't Roman. He was holding a severed head. Publius. Sirena had butchered Crassus's son, then sent his corpse back like a trophy. Crassus stared at the head, then at the sands where his boy had disappeared. The richest man in Rome, the kingmaker, the dealer, the fire savior, felt something cold settle in his gut. Not fear, not sorrow, rage. He ordered a retreat, but the Parthians never let them flee. They bled the legions slowly, day after day, until discipline cracked. At last, a message arrived. Sirena wanted to talk, a parley. He promised safe passage, and Crassus, desperate, broken, hollowed by grief, agreed. The two sides met in the twilight, near the ruins of a village swallowed by sand. But something was wrong. The Parthian tent was surrounded by soldiers, and inside the air smelled of honey, metal, and heat. Crassus stepped in, unaware. Behind him the flames rose higher, and somewhere, someone stirred the pot. Reality, death doesn't care who you are. Inside the tent, the air clung to Crassus like oil, thick, sweet, wrong. Sirena greeted him not as a general, not as an equal, but as a performer greets a condemned man before the show. He offered wine. Crassus refused. He offered a seat. Crassus remained standing. And then the accusations began. You came to conquer, to take what was not yours, to feed Rome's hunger, Sirena said calmly. But look at you now, hungry yourself. Crassus asked for the terms of peace. He asked for the lives of his men. But Sirena smiled with something colder than cruelty. Your men are dying in the dust. What's left to negotiate? Then came the chains. Crassus tried to resist, but his guards had vanished, disarmed or slaughtered outside the tent. The Parthians grabbed him, shackled him. The gold pot, boiling behind the curtain, hissed. The scream never came yet. They dragged him to a platform. The soldiers gathered in silence. This wasn't execution. It was spectacle. Sirena stepped forward and announced to his men, "Here stands the Roman who thought he could devour Parthia, so let us feed him." 2 men forced Crassus to his knees. Another pried open his mouth. And then came the gold. Not coins, not jewelry. Molten, liquid, death. They poured it slowly, not just to kill, but to humiliate, to punish the symbol of Roman greed with the very thing he worshipped. Crassus didn't scream. He couldn't. His throat seared from the inside out. His tongue blistered. His jaw twitched and locked. It wasn't just death. It was mockery made eternal. The soldiers watched, in horror, in awe, in silence, and when it was over, his blackened corpse was unrecognizable. But Sirena wasn't finished. He had the head severed, preserved, sent back to Rome, but not to be mourned, to be used. At a theater in Syria, Roman actors performed Euripides' Bacchae, a tale of arrogance and divine punishment, and for the role of Pentheus, a doomed king, they held up Crassus's real head on stage. The audience laughed. This was his legacy now. Not victory, not statues, a melted throat and a puppet's fate. Rome didn't build him a monument, didn't name a street. They remembered the banker who tried to become a god, and drowned in his own desire. Crassus thought gold would buy him greatness, but all it bought was silence, permanent, boiling, silence. The smoke curled from the tent, long after the crowd dispersed. What was left of Marcus Licinius, Crassus wasn't buried, it wasn't honored, it wasn't even mourned, it was used. His skull was passed from court to court like a cursed relic, a reminder, not of Roman strength, but Roman arrogance. Even the Parthians who loathed the empire didn't see Crassus as a worthy adversary. He was a cautionary tale, a man who mistook ambition for immortality. Back in Rome there was no grand funeral, no parade of grief. Caesar barely mentioned his death. Pompey, his former ally, used it to elevate his own power. The man who once held half the Roman economy in his palm vanished from public memory like dust in desert wind. And yet, his gold-plated silence echoed. For the Parthians, Crassus was a trophy. For Rome, an embarrassment. But for history, he became something far worse, a symbol of how greed rots the soul from the inside out. And it wasn't just the gold they poured into him. It was everything he had ever taken. The burned houses, the stolen lands, the slaves, the desperate deals made behind velvet curtains. It all came back, not as justice, but as fire. Sharena's words lingered long after his death. He devoured cities. We devoured him. Crassus believed power could be bought. That wealth made him untouchable. But the East didn't want his coins. They wanted a message, and so they gave one. Rome and the world saw it. A golden death for a man who worshipped gold more than gods, more than loyalty, more than his own blood. He had everything, and lost himself. They don't teach you this version in schools. They say Crassus died in battle, that he was a Roman hero, or perhaps just unlucky. But they leave out the gold, the screams, the silence, because it's easier to sanitize a death than confront what it really means. Marcus Licinius, Crassus didn't die because he was rich. He died because he believed riches made him invincible, because in his eyes the world was a ledger, and everything had a price. Lives, loyalties, even Rome itself. But history doesn't bow to accountants. And in the East, among the sands and broken standards of Carthage, he learned what true debt feels like. It burns, it melts, and it never forgets. The richest man in Rome tried to buy eternity. What he got was infamy.